Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. Who's the most evil person you've ever met in person? Please remember to like, share, hype, ask and listen for shoutouts, and subscribe. Have a great day. A person who wanted to get full custody of his children and the family home in a divorce. He paid a contract killer to kill his wife while he was overseas as an alibi. To plan a murder of his kid's mother, so they only had him, takes a high level of evil with all the planning involved. The contract killer turned out to be an undercover police officer. He only got 5 years in GAOL, which was not enough, but he will never see his kids again. My stepmom threw me and my brother out in the middle of winter because she didn't want us in the house. My dad split with my mom at 9 and moved to another city. When he worked evenings or nights, we got thrown out and strolled around until way past bedtime to get ourselves some sleep. She also didn't cook for us, so we lived on sandwiches and ate sausages at gas stations to feed ourselves. She also told us as often as she could how bad we were. We were skinny, lazy, would never become anything in life, etc., etc. She, on the other hand, has never kept a job and to this day just lives on my dad. I hate that fucking bitch. One of my dad's girlfriends, in addition to treating me like shit, years later I found out she would call my mom, leaving increasingly deranged messages about how she intends to completely replace her and civilize me. These messages would occasionally take the entire length of time the machine recorded for, so she'd call and leave more after the first one to continue the thread. It's truly fascinating how someone who would reveal to me an entire 5th grade class during the Christmas singing night that I was both on Adderall and incapable of swallowing the pills and had them sprinkled on Oreos would actually think she's in any capacity that she could replace my mom. A woman I worked with in a residential home for people with autism, she wanted to gain more power in the workplace and did so using false allegations, anonymous tips, and bullying behavior. However, the worst thing she did was manipulate the patients into attacking or harming staff members she didn't like. That woman was a monster, and I still think about things she did a lot. My friend's brother. When I first met him, it was when he was returning home from his stay in juvie. My friend was scared of his brother. I remember one time he showed up to another friend's house, so we all went silent and pretended like we weren't there so he would go away. He was only in school for about half a year before he stole a pistol and shot another kid, his supposed friend, and buried him in a shallow grave. He was tried as an adult and jailed. I recently heard that he's finally eligible for parole. My friend's brother's. When I first met him, it was when he was returning home. My biological father. He's a convicted serial artist and has drugged and kidnapped possibly 4 other women. He's so sociopathic that everyone who knew him before he got arrested adored him. My great aunt, who hated everyone, including her own kids, loved him. He was just that good at manipulation. He got jobs nobody would ever think about on his first day. His mindset is terrifying. He has no empathy, no respect, love, or even any moral well-being for another human being. He's a walking shell of a man who feels the need to manipulate and abuse people to get his way. He thankfully got over 365 years, and if he ever survives that, he'll have 3 more life sentences to go. He got a good judge. I've also met another man who was another father figure in my life, who was just as evil as him, but I actually knew him for a bit over 16 years. My bio father got arrested when I was 3, so I never really got to know him. But the other guy my mom was with for 16 years abused the absolute out of us because he was still so obsessed with the military he was in when he was 16. He's 64 years old. He was also just as sociopathic and narcissistic as my biological father. Also, with the sheer amount of shit he had told me while piss-ass drunk about all the shit he did and outside of the military back in the day, would get him longer than my biological father. My biological father, he's a convicted serial artist and has drugged and kidnapped possibly 4 other women. He's sociopathic that everyone who knew him before he got arrested adored him. Okay, guys, it's shout out time again. So, thanks for all the positive feedback after my mini rant yesterday. It really doesn't bother me that much, by the way. I was just pointing out one particular troll, but I think they deleted their comment. So, I move on. This is just what I do because I love it. Believe me, 5 years of doing this. If I didn't love it, I wouldn't do it. But today, I'd like to say hello to Kyle Bar 613. Thanks for being awesome. Dennis Hernandez, aloha. Heather Scott Fleming, I'm glad that you're here. Chantel, I know you have been posting for a long time and are hypercritical. I'm sure I earned most of it, but I do read it, so I hope you're well. Stephanie Williams, again, thanks for your support. And finally, as requested, she asked to be called Gigi. So Gigi, thanks again and have a great day, everybody. See you soon. My father had hundreds, if not thousands, of SA victims of all ages. My earliest memory was 3. I took him to court when I was 19 and my family turned on me saying I was hurting him, breaking his heart. What heart? My grand's neighbor all talked to me when they heard and said that he'd been doing it since they were all little kids too, but they didn't want anyone to turn on them either. Nobody stood with me in court, so he was hit with a 1-year anklet, but he was my grand's favorite, so he cried in court saying he was her driver and couldn't be without him. So he had to be 50 feet from her at all times. She worked in a school. BS, by the way. She drove better than any of us until her late 70s. The last time he came to my house to see her, primary caregiver, and she had dementia, he left his phone. It was filled with children he took pictures of. He worked in a carnival as a truck driver, so he had access to kids everywhere. I screenshot them all and sent them to anonymous tips before he came back for it. The cop showed up at my house February of this year, surrounding it and pulling my family from bed. We were forced to sit in the living room while they went through our stuff and took our phones and other devices. They were finally acting on my tip. Instead of going to the address I provided, they came to my house because that was the IP the tip was sent from. He died in 2023. Got away with every life he ever ruined. My dad killed something like 17 people in Central America for the U.S. Army in the 60s, and was very proud of it. Not a patriot or proud of his service, mind you, a genuine violent psychopath who openly confessed he liked to kill. Said he was good at it and missed it. Told me when giving someone a Columbia necktie was like when I was 12. So him. My coworker had an ex. It turned out this ex was a serial killer and may have killed upwards of 11 women. He sent my coworker a video of himself torturing one of his victims to death. He then killed himself and sent that to his ex as well. The entire case is still under investigation. It's obviously a traumatic thing for her, so I do not ask her detailed questions about him or the situation. Suffice it to say, the way she describes him makes him sound like one of the most evil people I've heard of. My advisee's stepmother welcomed him into her home only to abuse him in the most psychological way. Kept pictures of dead people around him when she knew he was suicidal. Would make these exaggerated vomit sounds anytime she used the bathroom after him. She made showers a nightmare because of the left a fraction of evidence that he showered. She would punish him over it. I'm talking the tub not being completely dry after. Cared more about her dogs than his well-being, and she didn't seem to care about those dogs at all. My ex, genius sociopath, met all the criteria. He had a child with the woman he dated before me, had this whole pitiful story about how she disappeared in the middle of the night with their baby and took her to Texas. I felt bad for him. He made it about 2 months into our relationship before the outbursts began. The loudest shouting I'd ever heard escalated into physical violence on 2 occasions. It all made sense why someone would get themselves and a baby away from him. I reached out to her. He tried to break into her home by smashing the window in the baby's room and went to jail for 6 months. She had done some digging on him as well, a long list of women with the same stories of rage, violence, constant drinking. He would put it in LaCroix cans, and constant cheating. Of course, Texas courts refused to give her full custody. Children need both parents. What a fucking joke. There's a little light within all this shit. The second and last time he went rage mode on me, he charged at me and my dog stepped in between us and bit him in the testicle. Him being in the hospital gave me time to get a protection order and change my locks. Always trust your gut. If something feels off, it more than likely is. My dad's ex-girlfriend gaslit my dad and belittled him at every chance. Tried to turn my dad against my fiancée. Threw a tantrum when she wasn't invited to the bride dressing trying on thing. Didn't work for 4.5 years and just spent all of my dad's money. Still lived off a monthly allowance that her parents gave her, a woman in her 50s. Took the money that was set for a wedding present to me and accidentally sent it to her son. It was never returned to the correct account. Handed me physical cash in an envelope from my dad that was supposed to be $1,000. It was $100 short. Finally got a job and her boss within 3 months. My grandmother got really sick and was in the hospital for 10 days. My dad and I took turns since we both worked. Well, she cleaned out his bank account and sent him a text message saying she was leaving. She left him with $40 and then days later sent a message that she'll give him $500 more of his own money. Never saw that again. She then went off into my car and my dad paid for her to West Virginia, where after it took a lot of time for my dad to mentally recover, she reached out to my dad saying her new boyfriend is abusive and she wanted to come back. Then got a DUI after wrecking that car in a ditch and asked my dad for a new car. My dad got sick and died pretty quickly after diagnosis. I tried to keep it off Facebook, etc., because I know she would find out. Well, she did after one of his friends posted a farewell. It took a whole 48 hours after my dad passed for her to reach out and family reach out to try and get money and my dad's car from the estate. Her shenanigans cost me a lot of money for a lawyer to make her go away and look like an absolute fool. But there were precautions I had to take, like stashing his car elsewhere and changing the locks on his house and simultaneously having weird cars turn around in my driveway. She eventually went away but started posting things about him for sympathy. Absolute psychopath. One of my parents' very, very close friends cheated several of their friends out of their life savings. He tried them too, but thankfully my mom has a background in finance, so they didn't invest in his opportunity. They did. I lent him a couple $100 though. The friend group, which was really tightly knit, broke apart over it. I think the ones who fell for it didn't want to face the ones who didn't, but also, knowing my mom, I wouldn't be surprised if she didn't handle it the most sensitive way. I don't think my parents ever emotionally recovered from it. Lots of stories surfaced about this man during his abundantly clear court case, and in the aftermath, he was stealing and cheating whenever and however he could, from petty shoplifting to romance scamming and grooming the elderly for inheritance. He's just pure greed. Jordan Vandersloot, yeah. I was in Aruba at Carlos and Charlie's, and he was hitting on a girl that I was friends with. Told her we needed to get the f*** out, lol. I met Mrs. Holloway earlier that night. She was still looking for Natalie. I asked her if she'd interview with my parents for a local paper, and she said yes. A few years earlier, I met O.J. Simpson in Aruba also. He invited me to have a drink with his group after taking a picture with me. Someone else asked for a picture, to which he also said yes. Well, that guy was turned to his friend and said, "I'm getting my picture taken with the famous murderer." OJ snapped and they started arguing about whether or not he killed his wife. OJ said, "Every bruise on her body was from me, but I didn't kill her. I dipped, lol. My college advisor. There was something just grotesque about her. She would sit and talk with you about life, goals, issues, etc. She would help you with these problems and get to know you, but when you make a tiny error, she would use all of that against you and nail you with such precision about how you are a worthless piece of human that you should drop out and just go somewhere else. She bragged that her graduate acceptance rate was 100%. This is because all of her advisees that didn't quite cut it dropped out, switched advisors, or changed majors. During mock interviews for whatever you needed, a literal notebook she developed over the years with every single response she had ever heard and how to shut you down. Oh, why do you want XYZ? Because of thing. Ah, well, why not do this other thing instead? That is also the same. Oh, that's not good enough for that. You would end the interviews thinking you'll never be good enough and you should quit. God damn, I hate her. This was in the 90s when I was a teen. We grew up in LA. My older cousin was dating a gang member who was involved with the Mexican mafia. He hung out and would bring around his friend, another Mexican mafia member who was basically a hitman for them. At the time that I knew them, these guys were maybe no more than 21 to 22 years old. There were rumors that this guy was a really, really bad dude who liked to torture people before he killed them, but my family didn't believe it because he acted like such a nice guy. I was only around him at family parties maybe 2 to 3 times, but I remember that he had this kind of eyes that smiled. The relationship between my cousin and his friend was short-lived, and none of us ever saw them again. About 10 years ago, a couple of my cousins and I were reminiscing and remembered him and wanted to see if the rumors we had heard about him were really true, so we Googled him. They were. Quick Google search turned up court cases and articles written about gang killings he was involved in. He was a member of a pretty notorious gang in LA, and if he found a rival gang member on the street, he liked to kidnap them and torture them before killing them. Some of the details were brutal. He got caught and was given a life sentence in the late 90s, ended up getting killed by another gang member in prison. Used to live in Mexico. At one point, some groups were fighting over territory in our area right between the border of Michoacan and GRO. Someone cut the heads off of a few people, claimed they belonged to the opposition, and stuck them on the bridge as a warning. In a bar, a guy I was talking to claimed to have been the one to do it. He described to me how difficult it was to cut through the neck. Used to be in the Mexican military, never been sure if I believed him. Another man killed 2 children I knew, leaving them to die in their mother's arms as a sign that he wanted the dad to pay money he owed. The dad had fled weeks before. Once a guy got out of an armored car surrounded by men with guns. He was getting in line to vote. This was in Acapulco. You can make whatever assumptions you want about who he was or what he did. I was with my buddy and we both had Bibles on us as we left a Christian group to go vote. The guy walked right up to us and started to tell us all about how there is no God, and the only thing that mattered was money and power. My buddy got very heated with him. It was very recent. Some people we knew had been killed. The guy ended up leaving us alone, but to this day it still sticks in my mind. That was over 10 years ago. That guy and all he stands for. My childhood friend Alan. When I moved back to Alaska when I was 9, I didn't make friends easily, and I was behind in school thanks to a lacking curriculum in the backwoods of Oregon. Alan seemed to accept me and quickly became my best friend, but he slowly became abusive with jabs and intolerance here and there. After the new year, we went out of the woods, which was when we pushed a tree down that struck my head. I survived, obviously, but I was left with a massive scar on my head. After that, the jabs at school turned to abuse, and he not only proclaimed that I was not my friend, but he would recruit mentally disabled kids and have them attack me. He became bolder and bolder, with the attacks beginning in the middle of class. I constantly heard him speaking my name in a hushed tone, and he went to classmates creating rumors about my family members and myself. Finally, after my mom was told by a piano student that he was saying that the tree push was not only on purpose, but intended to kill me, she confronted Alan while he delivered our newspaper. He told my mom he not only didn't need to talk with her, but that he could kill me whenever he wanted. He sped home on his bike, and when my mom talked to his mom on the phone, she screamed at mine how she didn't have the right to do that because he was perfect. All the while, he was screaming in the background how he hated my mom and I, and that he would kill us all. Well, his mom called the police on my mom, claiming she assaulted him with bruises to show for it. When the officer looked at them, he realized they were old injuries, likely given by his own mother. Well, the next day he tried strangling me in the middle of class, prompting intervention from the school. I remember vividly our teacher asking the class who Alan had spread rumors about me to. Literally the entire class raised their hands. She told them what he said were lies. When the principal asked Alan and I to explain ourselves, he claimed I called him fat. I didn't, and ironically his abuse brought about my own weight problem. In the end, I was moved to another class. 25 years later, he's never apologized, nor has he expressed an iota of remorse. He sent multiple kids to the hospital during his elementary school days, but because he was soft-spoken and fat, there, now I said it, people often referred to him as an angel. My first stepfather. He abused us in every way imaginable and took it to the worst level with my older sister from 9 to 13. He controlled every waking moment of our lives, forced my mother to work herself nearly to death, quite literally while he sat home collecting disability, while somehow still being quite capable of working on cars and doing various never-completed DIY projects around the house. He made my sister and I wait on him hand and foot, even when we were very small children. Made us stay up well past midnight on school days doing never-ending chores. Locked us in our bedroom while he left the house to keep us from eating. Kept us living in horrid living conditions, often without running water, heat, or electricity. Once my sister finally confessed his abuse to my mother, he was ultimately sentenced to prison and died there from a heart attack a few years later. He was 25 years older than my mom. I felt absolutely nothing that evening when the police officer came to our homes with the news. There was no sadness, surprisingly no anger, just a bit of relief that we'd never have to see that disgusting face ever again. I recently found out his first wife's obituary online. I read between the lines and I firmly believe that he did the same thing to his biological daughter from that marriage. It was quite detailed a bit, and it mentioned that Gary did something bad in relation to why the marriage ended. He never had any contact with his daughter in the years we knew him. He was pure evil. My mother ultimately met a saint of a man when I was 18. They married a few years later. He became my dad and my children's papa. My oldest didn't even realize he wasn't my bio dad until he was a teenager. He passed last year after 30 years of being a part of our family. That's now a giant hole that can never ever be filled. Rest in peace, Dad. Prison guards in Florida State Prison, and Gulf CI in particular. I had a legal issue. I was sentenced to 15 months, which meant I had to go to state prison instead of going to the county. That meant my security level was low as it could be. They sent me to a prison by Panama City, and sent me to one of the work camps that put me on the side of the road cutting grass and doing maintenance and landscaping work for the county. I tried to do the best I could because I tried to pretend like this was going back to boot camp when I was younger, but I had problems with my back and I started going to the doctor because I could not withstand the heavy work. Because I kept getting injured, I told them that I was going to refuse to work. That's when they locked me in confinement, which is a 2-man cell that is probably 8 by 12. I was there for 45 days, and then I was put on disciplinary squad. That's when I started filing grievances because it took me a couple of months to figure out how the rules work. Once I started filing a grievance to the Department of Corrections, they instructed the sergeant, who was in charge of the disciplinary squad, to forcefully let me know that if I didn't stop filing out paperwork and sending it to the Department of Corrections, that I was going to enjoy a lot more pain. After the second time, a large person came up and punched me a number of times, which led me to believe that it was in my best interest not to fill out any more paperwork while I was incarcerated. I only had a few months left. So I told him if they let me go to the doctor and try and get some relief, that I would stop doing the paperwork. The guy was seemingly a decent person, but he was still a sergeant working for a prison system. So if they told him to slap me around to get me in line, he was willing to do it. The funniest thing about that place was about 60 days before I got out, they hired a woman guard. She had never done this work before. She was probably in her early 20s, maybe mid-20s. She had gotten fired from Walmart. She was approximately 5 feet tall and 4 feet wide. When you would walk up to her, you had to get her attention because it was almost like she had forgotten how to breathe and would be looking out in the distance. So anytime I ever hear anybody talking about people escaping from prison, I always think about this moron having keys.